Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends on this glorious day, March 25th. Excited to be with you as always. A very sombering topic I'm going to be talking about, but you guys need to know, and I always like you to be ahead of the curve. Will the United States end up being sort of sucked into Yemen the same way we did in Vietnam? It's a reality and question we ought to ask. Of course, mainstream media is avoiding this specific statement, if I may use the term. I've been thinking about it for the last 3 days. Will it be right of me to say something like this? Will it be right of me to think in these terms? Will it be right to sort of expose this possibility that this possibility is there? And I'm starting to see the signs for it. So anyway, this is what I'm going to be talking to you about today, and providing you my own analysis in addition to geography and history of Vietnam, because a lot of people here in the West and the US have no idea. So, all right, let's say hi to our wonderful community. Please make sure to type in where you are joining me from. I will greatly appreciate it. Yesterday, I saw in a comment someone was from South Africa. I forgot sorry, I didn't save the name there, but I will greatly appreciate if you could. So, and I'm gonna get on right away into. I'm seeing some new names here. I don't know, like this one here. Bring back home President Duterte. Yes, I know what's going on in with the Philippines, and I will be addressing that soon with Professor Anna Malandog. So Dart, there's some new names here, guys. Here it is, Cape Town from South Africa. Good to see you, Dart. Greatly appreciate you being here. Also, from our wonderful, always thank you, Alistalok and Alexandra. Look where it is from. So Alexandra joining us from Japan. Good to see you here, and I hope you are doing well there. Pamadundu, I'm sorry. Salam to you as well. So, all right, guys, let me get into what we need to talk about. But first of all, I need to tell you two things that I overlooked yesterday. So I take my full responsibility, but again, I can't remember everything. So, however, one of them was one of our viewers who sent me a comment, and I'm going to share it with you. But first, I want to wish my Persian viewers, especially from Iran, I want to wish them a happy New Year. Why is this? Is because, as you know, is the Nowruz, rather, Nowruz, which means in English, it's a Persian term, but it means a new day, and that marks usually the first day of the Persian calendar, and coincided with the spring equinox, which is usually between March 1st and March 21st. So the comment I get from Final Solution H, he wrote, and I quote, "Come on, Doc, you can at least mention the Persian New Year when you talk about Iran. At least wish your Iranian listeners a happy New Year." You're absolutely correct. I'm glad you shared this in the comment, so we can wish, or I can at least wish my Iranian listeners a happy New Year, and for all of you to share that. So thank you for that. Now, second thing I need to let you know also that I've sort of overlooked is that, does anybody know what does March 24th, 1999 reminds you of? Something major happened in Europe. So I'm going to give you a hint here. Look at this picture. Let me see in the chat box if you guys know what it is. And again, I just wanted to, and then I overlooked it completely. So East London. So let me see what it. War UTUC Super. That is correct. And what we're talking about? We're talking about the NATO targeting, or NATO's aggression against Yugoslavia. As you know, it was in March 24th. That's when it happened. So it was a great article by Professor Hordorsky. Michel Kodorsky, he's professor of economics at the University of Ottawa. So I'm going to share a link with you guys should you want to read that. It's a very, very interesting article. And I know about Michel. I've been reading his articles. Very, very savvy guy. I might even extend an invitation for him to come over here. But this is what it was right there. March 3rd, 1999 to October 6th. Not October, but March, April, May, on May 10th, 1999. Yeah. Never forgive, never forget. We all know what NATO did. And interesting enough, as the professor argued, that at least now we know what the war agenda for NATO which was later used in other conflict. And actually, we're seeing it today in Yemen, and we're seeing it in Ukraine. In Yemen, so far is the U.S., but don't forget, the U.S. is what's at the front. There might be players behind the scenes. So we're going to be talking about this. And this leads me, guys, quickly to highlight to you the survey that I asked you a question. Will China use force to respond if the United States, if and when the U.S. stirs trouble in South China Sea? 72% of you said yes, China will use its force per se to do so. 72, and I think the other one was 20% said no. 70%, I'm sorry, 70% said yes, China will respond using force. 20% said no, and 9% said I don't know. So the same question I asked you survey again about Israel, whether it will be a civil war inside Israel. 54% said yes, 28% said no, and 18% say I don't know. So I just wanted to share this with you quickly here. All right, let's get on with oh, by the way, remember to join me on Thursday for my conversation with Larry Johnson right there. So we're going to be addressing very some interesting topics. And on Friday, I will be conversing with my dear friend Carl Za. And yes, I call him my friend. He's a decent man. So I truly enjoyed talking to Carl on a regular basis. And I look forward to one day visiting his part of the world and link up with him for a cup of coffee. So, and on Saturday, remember to join me for our community conversation. And Dr. Stewart is going to be here. He's going to join me for about 30 minutes to answer some of your questions, health questions, because he's into the health domain and he knows a great deal. So as a matter of fact, one of you asked me if I could recommend him to Donald Trump. So Dr. Stewart can examine his head. But you all know what I mean. All joking aside, what Mr. Trump is doing now is leading us to a World War III. This is what we are looking at right now with this, because here is the thing, and I'm going to get into our topic right away with sharing this screen with you here. Take a look here, guys. And the reason I want to share this with you in its original language is because I want you to see the date. I'm going to highlight it right here in the Arabic language. So I'm going to highlight this one here. Take a look. This one I highlight. Look at the date. It's March 25th, which is today. This is what happened. And basically what it says, حوثي يستهدف مطار بن غوريون وحاملة طائرة أمريكية للمرة الثانية خلال 24 ساعة. Basically translated, Houthis targeting Ben Gurion Airport and a U.S. aircraft carrier for the second time within 24 hours. So, and this is where I just want you to see it with your own eyes. This is right there. What this is all about. Basically, the spokesman for the Houthi military, Yahya Saree, stated that, or announced at dawn on Tuesday, which means today, early, that Ben Gurion Airport in Israel was targeted with 2 ballistic missiles. Now, one of them, and I need to show you guys the I need to show you the picture of the type of missiles that were used into this one here. And I looked into this and I get the picture. So here is one. So The two missiles, one of them is Dhul Fiqar, and second one is Palestine 2. And the U.S. aircraft carrier, USS Harry Truman, and a number of naval vessels were engaged in a clash in the Red Sea. Let me highlight this one for you guys to see what I'm referring to here. So bear with me here, right there. So I want you to see it right there, highlight it. I'm highlighting it. Hide this picture right there. Bisaruchain Palestinian, two ballistic missiles, one Dhul Faqar and the other one Palestine 2. And in addition to clashes with the USS Harry Truman, and a number of naval vessels were engaged in a clash in the Red Sea for the second time in 24 hours. So this is what I need you to see with your own eyes, because and this paves the way for me to lead into our conversation regarding the key question, because the key question is, are we looking again at a Vietnam 2.0? A lot of people do not want to sort of ask the hard questions that matters. And even the idea, I even argued this, guys, way back when the Saudis were pounding the Yemenis defenseless people, okay, with the help of the Americans, the British, the German, the French, because we all sent in weapons. So I wrote some scathing articles back then. I'm going to provide you the link for that. One of them, I remember, title is called Yemen betrays U.S. military decline in a chaotic Middle East. And my second article was about padding. I titled it padding, meaning padding U.S. coffers on the faraway miseries of others. This one was basically about sending weapons to Yemen at the expense of the defenseless people. So I'm going to put the link for both articles for you guys, should you want to read them later on. Because as I said, I used to write for Huffington Post, Waco Trade, and so many other places. But of course, I don't do that now anymore. But those are the articles. It's on the record there, should you decide to read this one. Once again, this leads me to the key question: will Yemen becomes the US's new Vietnam? Yeah, it's legitimate questions. So because with the US now continue to pound or launch more air raids, which, by the way, targeting civilian locations, not military locations. So, and this was happened just overnight, last night, overnight across Yemen. The Houthis are not deterred or intimidated, for that matter. And this is why I am starting to feel sort of leaning towards, are we going to be seeing another Vietnam in Yemen? Because it will turn into that. Look what the Saudis, despite their assistance from the US and all that, couldn't defeat the Houthis on Yemeni grounds. United Arab Emirates, which was slaughtering, also contributing to the killing of defenseless civilians. Those are so-called Muslim countries. This is where the ugliness of human beings. What can Muslim brother do to another Muslim human being? All this name and religion and all this, it's nonsense. This is what I'm getting into, guys, and I need you to understand as to whether we are moving into that direction. And it seems to be the case. So now, here is the thing about what's going on regarding these particular developments. So what the U.S. ended up doing last night or the night before is they fired on Sana'a as campaign against the Yemeni Houthis continues. But on the other hand, the U.S. was targeting the suburbs of the capital, Sana'a, that is. And I remember I've been in that part of the world. So I spent a lot of time in Yemen. I was in Sana'a, and I was very familiar with the outskirts of the region. So there is no military installations there. It was one particular base, I remember, in the outskirts of Sana'a, but that one wasn't targeted. But here is what the Yemenis are saying themselves. It's because what they are noticing is that these attacks are now very violent. So as the U.S. continued to sort of launch these air raids across the Yemen capital, Sana'a, that is. So, but it becomes the question, are we targeting military installations or are we targeting civilian locations? And there is exactly when you go back into the history as to how the Vietnam has begun. Because here is the reality. Here is what was disclosed by the Houthis, Ran Health Ministry spokesperson. A citizen was killed and 13 others were injured, including 3 children, in the final toll of the U.S. aggressions on a residential building in Sana'a areas, specifically in Asir area. End of quote. This is what, and it's showing this one here as to where this is headed. That's where I am leaning. I'm getting ahead of the curve here by asking that question, because now the U.S. is stuck. Because here's the thing, and I mentioned this before, I don't want to beat the dead horse here. If we leave now, we're already done with credibility. We got no credibility left whatsoever anyway. But again, it will become the question of what Trump's saying prior to becoming a president, that I'm gonna pull the US out of all the conflicts. It will be no more wars. And here you are. You're the one causing one right now. A second thing is, it will, on the sort of the optics of it on the international stage, it's so bad. We couldn't do it in Yemen. I'm sorry, we couldn't do it in Iraq. We couldn't do it in Afghanistan. What makes us think that we can do it in Yemen? And now it proves that the Yemenis, the Houthis that is, took stand against the mighty Americans. And the only other option left for Mr. Trump is to negotiate behind closed doors. This is where I am going to get into the geography and history of Vietnam and try to put a comparison for you. Then, of course, you reach your own conclusion regarding this aspect. So let's start first with geography, and I'm going to share the screen with you. So you'll see. A lot of people do not know really the facts that, first of all, we lost in Vietnam. We didn't win Vietnam. The Vietnam was able to defeat the Americans. So Vietnam, what are you looking at? You're looking at the location of Vietnam, which is situated in Southeast Asia along the eastern coast of Indo-Chinese Peninsula. It is located in the northern and eastern hemisphere of the Earth. Vietnam bordered about 3 countries. So Vietnam has land borders with those 3 countries. You have China to the north, and Cambodia and Laos to the west. Of course, the Gulf of Tonkin with the island of Hainan Dao, which belongs to China, I believe, lies to the northeast of Vietnam. To the south and east, Vietnam is bordered by South China Sea, and the Gulf of Thailand lies in the southwest. Very, very interesting to see where this is, the locations of all this. This is the Gulf of Thailand, of course. And so I just want you to see that a part of the world where Vietnam is. So let's get into the history of Vietnam briefly. I'm not going to get into detail, but I'm going to share one clip with you before I'll jump into my own analysis regarding the comparison between the two. So let's play this clip because a lot of people do not even know particular aspects here. So I'm waiting till it crosses into the, where is it? Right there. So we just wait till this commercial ends up playing, because there's nothing I can do about that. All right, let's take a listen.
An international man of mystery who went by many names and lived in dozens of places before returning to his own country to lead a revolution. We're talking about Ho Chi Minh, communist leader of North Vietnam. who fought against the United States and won. Ho Chi Minh was born Nguyen Sinh Khun in central Vietnam in 1890. Vietnam at that time was part of French Indochina, a colonial possession of France. The future Ho Chi Minh was a good student, and according to Confucian tradition, was given the name Nguyen Tat Tan, which translates to the accomplished. As a young man, Nguyen decided to see the world, so he hopped a French steamer and worked as a kitchen helper under a fake name. Specific details are sketchy, but it seems the future revolutionary knocked around for almost a decade. While living in Paris, Ho Chi Minh worked as a photo retoucher, like Photoshop before there was Photoshop, but he was also politically active. He tried to petition US President Woodrow Wilson during the Versailles peace talks. Ho Chi Minh's request? That Vietnam be granted independence from French rule. Wilson didn't even acknowledge the young Vietnamese national. It wasn't long after that Ho Chi Minh joined the French Communist Party. A few years later, he bounced to the USSR while posing as a Chinese merchant named Chen Bang. After studying communism in Moscow, he moved to Canton, China, calling himself Nguyen Ai Q. Are you keeping track of the number of names this guy used? Because I lost count. He returned to his native Vietnam in 1940. He'd been gone almost 30 years. And he finally began to call himself Ho Chi Minh, or Bringer of Light. And what did he bring? An organization called the Viet Minh, which sought an independent Vietnam. The Viet Minh took advantage of the chaos caused by World War II, and in 1945 seized the northern city of Hanoi. Ho Chi Minh became the leader of the new democratic state of Vietnam. But the French held on to the southern part of Vietnam, and a complicated civil war between the communist north and anti-communist south ensued. This ultimately led to U.S. involvement in the region, as Uncle Sam put his weight behind the anti-communist forces. You may have heard of this. It's called the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War ground on through the 1960s. Although Ho Chi Minh had stepped down from day-to-day leadership, he remained an important figure for North Vietnam, a symbol of Vietnamese unification. And he had one more name. He was called Uncle Ho. However, this friendly moniker obscures many of the negative aspects of Minh's rule. He instituted a policy called land reform, violently seizing farms from rural landowners, killing thousands in the process. In addition, after American soldiers took the city of Hue in 1968,
all right, I'm going to stop right there, guys, because it's just a little bit long, and I'm going to provide you the link, and you can take a look at it yourself. Let me put the link. There was another clip there, but I'm not going to play it because I have to cover what I intend to do in this live stream. So here is the link for the history as far as the Vietnam, if you want to look at it later on. So. Now, here is the important thing I need you to understand regarding the history of the Vietnam War. So now I'm going to ask you a question for those who understand or know a little bit about the Vietnam topic here. What year was the deadliest for the Americans in the Vietnam War? Does anybody know? Just put in the year in the chat box if you happen to know what year was it. The deadliest year for American soldiers in Vietnam. So just think about the time frame of the Vietnam, how long it took, and it was one particular year that was the deadliest. 1972? No, actually, what's Theater of the Absurd. You got it. 1968. Vlad, 1969, close by. 1968 was the deadliest. But here is the thing is, because this is where you see. And I got some images, pictures rather here. I'm going to share them with you. Like, for example, this one, which you saw from that time. And this was one particular picture. And I give credit to Art Green. His name is Art Greenspan. Greenspan. Yeah, Greenspan. I give credit to him for this particular picture because it reflects the deadliest year of 1968. For the American soldiers. Very, very, very interesting aspects of it. There's another picture here. No, this is for the Houthis. Yeah. So that's the one. I just wanted you to guys be aware of that. Why? Of course, because the picture you saw summed up the tremendous cost being paid by young men fighting in Vietnam. And the reason I want to share this with you guys is to bring it to today. We're going to be seeing the same if the U.S. deployed U.S. Ground troops to Yemen. Of course, they're not going to do that because the terrain in Yemen is very rugged, let alone let alone one other aspect that differ from the era of the 60s, of course. Technology. So when you look at what the Houthis have at their possession, we're going to have to think twice about thinking. We're going to just go, and things are different now, very different. So you add the technology aspects to the equation. Yes, here we are. We have in this mighty aircraft USS Harry Truman. Didn't fade, didn't deter the Yemenis. We end up sending the second aircraft carrier, USS Carl Vinson. Where is all this might? The same aspect I would say regarding the Vietnam. We were thinking that we're going to be sort of defeating the Vietnamese, and we couldn't. And what's important about this to understand, and I'm going to take you back to 1945. Why 1945? It's because that's when a top secret, as a matter of fact, recently it came up to the light, but it was between 1945 to 1967. It was a top secret document, came out from the Department of Defense, and this was based on a study of the US political and military involvement in Vietnam, which took between here is the thing, a lot of people do not know. The Vietnam War started in 1960s. No. The involvement was the political then and military later on. It started from 1945, which was what? The end of World War II, all the way to 1967, and it kept going, of course, because this particular article was published in 1971. And that one particularly shed the light on the Nixon administration, which ramped up the conflict in Yemen, in Vietnam. The same thing we see in Mr. Trump is doing, ramping up the attacks against the Houthis, or Yemen for that matter, and thinking that he's going to subdue them or intimidate them or whatever the case. Turns out to be the reverse. In Yemen, in Vietnam back then, despite Nixon ramping up tensions, the conflict, the Vietnamese were fighting back. The same thing we are seeing today in Yemen. The moment the US escalates, the Houthis escalates as well. That's just how it works. And the report, which was leaked, by the way, the ones about these top secret documents of defense study, this report was leaked to the Times at the time by military analyst, none other than Daniel Ellsberg. If you know a little bit of history of what happened with Daniel Ellsberg, which he was a military analyst, he's the one who leaked the information, because with him leaking this, it further eroded support for keeping US forces in Vietnam. In other words, you start to see more and more people against the war in Vietnam, which what it was back then. The same thing we are seeing today. And this is why you're seeing now what the Trump administration is doing, for example, with Columbia University, trying to silence anybody who stands for what's right, given what's going on in Gaza. Which takes me back to what the Houthis are doing, because all the Houthis are saying is that if you stop the not allowing, you have to allow food and water for Gaza, and you have to go back to the agreements regarding the ceasefire. And if you do that, we will not launch any missiles. That's what the Houthis are saying. Simple as that. The same arguments can be made. I was back in Vietnam. And that's usually with the leak of this information back then about Vietnam, people start to support bringing the troops back here. This is the mistake Donald Trump made, not understanding history. And he's going to end up he's already sucked in it. And that's what led me to ask the question, could Yemen become the next Vietnam for the United States? So it was a great article by our team, Kirk Pinnock. I'm going to share it with you guys again, because I do a lot of reading when I copy. Let me share it with you. And that's why, because I get your information from reliable sources, first of all, and we just go from there. So now in his article, and here is how he titled that one. Very, very interesting. How Yemen became the Red Sea graveyard of empires. Which one he's comparing this to? Another country. Which country is he comparing this to? You should know this one here, guys. Which country we can say the same about? The graveyards of empires. Oh, Al-Stalokin, Afghanistan, indeed. Indeed, Afghanistan. Q7E, you got it, Afghanistan. Al-Amsin, Afghanistan, you guys got it. That's the other country we can do that. So now, here is the thing. In addition to this part, he added one particular aspect to this title, is that where coalitions come to perish. And I'm going to take you a little back into history because I wrote extensively on this at that time. And even when I wrote my Saudi book, I did address this one. So you all remember now that when the United States launched Operation Prosperity Guardian, you all know what it is, right? The military campaign against the Houthis, who controlled the large part of Yemen at the time. Well, this still, of course. Along the United States were the international coalition that included countries like Britain, France, Italy, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, and others. So even I found out, even Finland has sent in 8 highly trained and motivated soldiers, Finland. So, and despite, and this is my point, guys, why I wanted to share this article with you, and I'm going to react to it, and I'll provide you the link in the description also. Why I wanted to share this video is to highlight to you that despite the technological superiority of the West, the Saudis weren't doing this on their own. The Saudis were backed by an army of technicians and sort of intelligence and so forth. Even with the superiority, the coalition in itself, this is what the Saudis back then did in Yemen. They couldn't succeed. So is the US when they launched this so-called Operation Prosperity Guardian. So despite all this, the coalition faces unforeseen obstacles at that time in Yemen. And this is why it got the word the graveyard of empires, because we couldn't lift the blockade on the Red Sea till today. Even today, that blockade still holds. The Yemenis still control that. So, because if you think about Yemen history, go back to 1839. What happened in 1839? That was when the British conquered Yemen for the first time and captured the city of Aden. Yeah, back in 1839. That's how far back. And of course, it goes without saying about what took place in 2015, which I am very familiar with. That's where I wrote those articles, because we were fueling the tensions. We were providing more weapons to the Saudis. So, because here is the thing, the Saudis inherited the initiative from the Brits and the Egyptians and got involved in another war in the south of the Arabian Peninsula. And that was the 2014-2015. So, and this is where Ansarullah, or Houthis, which is a Shia group, by the way, known by the name of Houthis, that is. This is why they end up having the sort of the president at that time. It was none other than Hadi Abdurrabbu Mansour, which was installed by the Saudis with the support of the Americans. So what happened is that the Arab Gulf states end up sending their troops, United Arab Emirates, the Saudis, and even some others. They didn't want to come forward. So, and that's what they became the front of the confrontation at that time. This is why they couldn't, oh, sorry, I need to remove this. There we go. I have a picture here for you. I need to share it with you guys for you to see. And this is where the Saudis, this coalition, by the way, which was, and look just the hypocrisy of the Muslim world. I'm going to tell you the countries that were involved in this coalition at that time when the Saudis were attacking Yemen. So You're looking at Kuwait. You're looking at Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Pakistan, Qatar and Sudan. Yeah. Why the heck would those be involved in this? And this is what they called themselves, the Peninsula Shield. That was the name that was given to them. But in reality, most of those countries that I mentioned, they didn't contribute much because they know what the outcome will be. So, and that's when in 2015, they started bombing the Houthis or Ansarullah's possession in Yemen. To no avail. They didn't succeed in all this. And this is where the Saudis found out. Because what happened at that time, Yemen is experiencing the same thing that now in Gaza. This is why the Houthis are saying what they're saying. Why? Because back then, 2015, women and children began to suffer from food shortages. Why? Because the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates put a blockade. Those are Muslim countries doing this against another Muslim countries. That's why I'm saying religion is just being used, especially when it comes down to the Saudis. Claiming that title of the leader of the Muslim world. Heck no. How do you claim this? Did God come down and send you a special message? Come on, get real. And this is when Yemen was on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. It's the same thing we're seeing now in Gaza. And this is why the Houthis are saying, allow food, allow water, go back to the ceasefire. This is the word to Israel. Then we will stop. For the US, you stop targeting our country, we will stop targeting you. And this is where Saudis were unable to win the war by air. End up thinking, well, we're going to send our ground troops. But it soon became clear to them at that time, even with their advanced military hardware, which, by the way, most of the weapons comes from the US, unlimited financial resources, they couldn't defeat the Houthis. They couldn't even fight. They had to get mercenaries, by the way. Saudis were calling on some other countries to send their mercenaries. We were provided, I was aware of that, we were provided the intelligence for targeting. And that's why the Saudis end up recruiting from countries in Africa, in Latin America. And that's when that coalition at that time suffered the setback. And this is what I need you to understand about the dynamics that is going right now. It was a great historian by the name Gibbon, who wrote, and I quote, that happy Arabia was almost never conquered because it was a natural fortress. From its steep, red-brown coast to its amber mountains, the desert and harsh climate serves as an additional defenses. Since ancient times, life in Yemen has revolved around oases, forts, and Orion controlled by powerful clans. Even the rule of the Ottoman Empire was nominal in these places. The Turks had to keep 4 divisions in Yemen to signal their presence. End of quote. I mean, to me, it became clear. You're not going to defeat the Houthi, Ansarullah, or Yemenis in general. What makes us think? Because of our might, we think we're going to do it. And it's proven. What now they're saying? You escalate, we will escalate. And that's exactly what is happening. So this is why I'm saying I am looking at Yemen turning into another Vietnam if we keep going forward into that. The Saudis couldn't do it with the help of the Americans. They couldn't do it. And sending the Germans, sending weapons. France was sending weapons. They couldn't do it. So, and I think it will be the same. Here is what I argued back then regarding this particular aspect of Yemen in my, I remember I wrote it in the Saudi book. Here is what I wrote. There is currently a debate behind the scenes among business leaders, global affairs, and security analysts regarding MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, that is, ability to lead the kingdom of Saudi Arabia once he receives full power from his ailing father, King Salman. MBS's impulsiveness and ill-conceived strategies were demonstrated by Saudi Arabia's ground and air strikes on rebel-held areas in Yemen. This unsuccessful military action to defeat the Houthi rebels has raised serious humanitarian concerns. The Saudi ground and air strikes are contributing to the displacement of more than 3 million Yemenis, in addition to the spread of famine. And yeah, one Muslim country, what is doing to another Muslim country? And that's again, and I know, to me was because here is the thing, it was clearly that what the Saudis aim at is to influence the political outcome in the region to their favor. This is what was the hope, However, the kingdom was lost, Saudi Arabia, that is, lost in a maelstrom of conflict as it reacts to one problem after another because they couldn't manage themselves. Saudis cannot fight. Any of those Gulf states, any cannot fight. I'll take one exception to Turkey, Egypt. That's about it. Iraq at that time when Saddam Hussein was still in power. This is why we went after Iraq, because it was a strong army. And of course, Iran. The rest of in the Muslim world, no, don't count on that. The Saudis found out. And this is why the Saudis sort of at that time, their ongoing air and ground strikes and so forth failed to achieve their objectives. It's the same scenario we are seeing today. We are conducting those air raids and air strikes and all that stuff. Are we achieving anything? No. Because that tells you the impulsive responses. This is what we are doing. This is what the Saudis have done. You will think they have learned the lesson. You think we have learned anything from the lessons of history. But for us, it's not about learning because we are poor readers of history. It is about maintaining the conflicts. That is what it's about. Excuse me. And because the idea that the Saudis were hoping that they could achieve anything, no, they weren't. So, and now you have the U.S. officials saying statements that I couldn't confirm. I really couldn't confirm that. So, but I'm going to share it with you. Here is what Waltz, the National Security Advisor, is saying, and I quote, "We've hit communication nodes, weapon factories, and even some of their over-the-water drones production facilities." On another one, end of quote. On another one, he said, and I quote, "U.S. attacks were taking out key Houthi leaders or leadership," end of quote, including the head of the military program, missile program. Are you going to believe what the administration is saying? As an American, no, I won't. And I won't trust the government. You can't. Trust the government at your own peril. And this is where it became what the Houthis countered that by saying they have dismissed the U.S. claims because it's information warfare that is targeting, because the U.S. saying targeting military installations. No, they're targeting civilians. And that's what the Houthis counterclaim with this by saying, and I quote, "The Houthis have dismissed the U.S. claims that it is targeting military sites in Yemen as a complete lie and slander," end of quote. So, because what the Houthis end up doing is showing the images, the pictures, the scenes, the evidence, and the types of victims, which expose the U.S. double standards. So, and this, for you to understand, should the U.S. gets involved into all this again, be sucked into Yemen, which most likely it is the case, because now, what if the U.S. stops? That's it, And we're talking about the U.S. wanted to fight China? Give me a break. Come on. It's unrealistic. We couldn't even lift the blockade on the Red Sea. What makes us think we're going to fight China in the South China Sea? It just, you will think, and I'm like lost for words. Doesn't the government in Washington think? Don't they have people who can think logically, realistically, pragmatically? And I just don't get it. I really don't get it. Are they just giving hypes to Americans, which feeding them lies, which most Americans buy this kind of stuff? But again, it's because the poor, we don't read history to understand what groups like Ansarullah or Houthis will do. We don't learn from the history of what took place in Vietnam and who ended up winning the war, not the Americans. So, you have now the whole country mobilized for this, and they will fight. So, and this is what you need to understand, another dimension that the US doesn't want others to know. Do you know why the Saudis, and I'll take you back again, why the Saudis were depending on the US? Because most of the weapons the Saudis buys, the US holds the key to that. Meaning what I'm referring to here is the bigger items. And I'm going to give you a quick example, because something I'm a little familiar with. Because I used to, back in my days, when I will go to one state, I can disclose locations where the testing of the F-35s used to take place, because there is a location for the Joint Strike Force that has the F-35s. And I was there to see the F-35s taking off for the testings and so forth. So I'll give you an example about the F-35s. When you think about the F-35s, the way we do it is that there is one version for us and the rest for whomever we end up selling those highly expensive and ineffective planes to other countries. The Saudis are one of those. Saudis will buy whatever we tell them. Oh, it's for your own security, for the security of the monarchy. Just tell the Saudi this, they'll freak out, the government, because the government is the monarchy. So this is why, because I'll challenge anybody, especially those in the Muslim world, that they say that because was it ever a kingdom in the Muslim world back then? Was the Prophet a king? It wasn't. It was just an average man, sort of whatever. It was never a kingdom. So what makes now those so-called kings claiming that, well, we got a divine power from God? That's one given. It's nothing but hypes, guys. I just want you to understand this one. So to go back to the weapon issue. So for example, F-35s. F-35s are equipped, and what I'm sharing with you is not classified. What I can tell you is the location where those training used to happen or where the Joint Strike Force. Now that is classified, but what I'm sharing with you is public information if you know where to look for it. The F-35s are equipped with some sort of a disabling key, and that is controlled by the Pentagon, of course. And that disabling key, which is a software and almost like an encryption key, if you will, because that can immediately prevent a plane from taking off. But you have to understand why. So even the countries who end up getting the F-35s, and not many so far, even the maintenance of the aircraft will have to be done by the Americans. Is the same argument I've made way back about Australia thinking of getting the nuclear subs. Do you think the Aussies going to operate those nukes, the nuke submarines? No, it's the Americans. The Aussies wouldn't even be in the control room to begin with. I mean, you all know about the what is that base we have in Australia? I draw a blank on it. Geez, I draw a blank. It's in the middle of nowhere. Does anybody know? If you remember, it's in Australia. Yeah, I draw a blank on it. What is anyway, it'll come back to me later on. The question is, there is a military installation in Australia joined between, Pine Gap. Thank you, Marco. Who said that one? Maxwell Sterling. Thank you very much. Yeah, I draw a blank. Anyway, Pine Gap. Well, Pine Gap, if you know something, is that there's a section inside Pine Gap. It's off limit to Aussies. Doesn't matter whether you have security clearance or not, because even for that, the security clearance goes beyond TS, beyond top secret. So that's my point, to highlight to you that with this F-35s. So, and this is why any country that wants to do the maintenance will have to have the pre-approval from the US. So, and this leads me to talk about the Arab countries who might be thinking about purchasing this plane. So, well, there is one condition for those Arab countries to even agree for the US to allow them to purchase this, even though they are not going to get it. You know, there's the Saudis got the F-35s. Maybe they did, but on limited basis. Even Turkey didn't get it. But there is one condition. You guys know what that condition is? Is that those countries, especially from the Arab world, will have to make peace with Israel. So meaning the condition is you have to agree with Israel before we sell you the weapons. Most of the Arab people are oblivious to this. Most of the Arab or Muslim world, for that matter. So that is one of the conditions. So, and by the way, it doesn't apply just to F-30. It applies to F-35s. To my knowledge, it applies to F-16s and F-18s. So here is the thing. For these planes, the US that controls the encryption key for it to make it inoperable, it won't work. But it will allow that if the Arabs are fighting each other, if they are attacking Iran, for example. Now, in this case, the US will let the plane operate. And this is why, if you think about in West Asia or Middle East, which country has the F-35s? There's the only one country. Which one is that? Let me see here, guys, in the chat box. Which country has the F-35? It's not a secret, but it's known. Amanda, you got it. You got it. Israel. Why is this? For a reason. So the Israel can maintain the dominance. And this is what the Arab and Muslim pathetic leaders do not understand, the dynamics. So, and this is why I said, and I'll take you back to 2015 when the Saudis and its Arab coalitions wanted to sort of defeat the Houthis or Ansarullah, and they couldn't. So you have now even countries in the West, and I'm aware of two countries, Germany and Canada. Two more countries that I am not certain of. I get the word that they might, but not sure. And those two are Greece and Portugal. So those countries, they are now reconsidering, and they weren't allowed to see the specifics of the plane, which is the classified part of it. Because remember, those planes are more computer software stuff, whatever. They weren't allowed to see that. So, because that's what controls the mechanisms of the plane. So to Arabs, first of all, if you want this, when I say Arabs, who can afford it? You're looking at the Gulf states because they have money and they can. F-35 is very expensive, but it's effective in comparison to. I looked at the cost for F-35s and the the Su-54, the fifth generation, the Russians, or the J-20, the Chinese, far advanced with less cost. But the Saudis will buy the Americans because we dictate the terms. Remember, always think, when the Saudis buy the stuff, it's for the survival of the monarchy. That is all about. So basically for the Arabs, they have to, first of all, agree to peace with Israel. And if they want to use those planes against each other, we will be okay with that. Go back to Iraq war. We were funding both sides, of course, for Iran through a third party. So, and that's why when you have the pathetic Arab leaders or Muslim leaders spending billions of dollars, no, it's worthless, because you have now dozens of countries, literally dozens of countries, are canceling the purchase of these US fighter jets. To my knowledge, And again, it's because how can you buy a plane that you don't have a full control of? That just doesn't make any sense. And this is why I am aware of two countries that now have canceled. One of them is Canada, and the other one is Portugal. They canceled this deal of buying the F-35s. Germany, which, by the way, was about to buy even 30 or 35 of those planes, and now reconsidering their options. Well, Germany is another subservient state. We dictate the term. Even Canada, Denmark, which was thinking about buying it, now is kind of reconsidering. And especially for those two countries, Canada and Denmark, given what Trump just said, it makes perfect sense. Because if they have the F-35s, we will be able to control it, and they won't be able to use it to either target US forces if they end up invading those countries. Because you all know Mr. Trump wants to make Canada our 51st state, and Mr. Trump wants to invade Greenland or annex Greenland, which, by the way, today the Prime Minister of Denmark rejects the upcoming visit of the US delegations. Why is the US delegations going? But again, all this is nothing but hypes, because if Denmark wants to do something, then sever the diplomatic relations with the US and be done with it. Like they always say, watch what they do, not what they say. And this is where I wanted just to go to wrap up this one here for you guys, the idea of where this is headed regarding the US targeting the Houthis or Ansarullah for that matter. If the US keep persisting on this, this will turn into another Vietnam. That's something we're not going to win, because no other major power was able to do so before in Yemen. Ask the Brits. And this is just Ansarullah. Think about Iran if we are thinking about striking Iran. And that's, again, another, I am looking closely, watching this closely as to these developments, as to whether there will be what do you guys think? Let me rephrase all this. I'm going to ask you, what do you guys think? You think we will strike Iran with this jointly with the Israelis? Let me just see in the chat box, yes or no. Karakulak, you say no. Amanda, no way. Ramzi Abdurrahman, good to see you, Ramzi. Good to see you. You say, what is Ramzi? You say no. Maxwell, you say nope. Famida, you say yes. Dave H, you say no. Inzaman, you say no, I don't think so. Marvin Vargas, you say yes. When you say yes, that means just the Israelis by themselves. YT, you say no. Francisco L, you say no. Dart Vader, maybe. Shane, yes, I agree with you. Everything is possible. Yeah, there is the possibility of that. I agree with that. Herc Owen, you say no. I will have to go with majority of no. I don't see this because the US will find out. Iran is not your other. The missile capabilities they have, and I am aware of some. I am aware of what they have. I read enough, and even in my days in Washington, I was aware of certain aspect that was made it. They didn't make it to the public knowledge. So no, we're gonna have to think twice about that one. I don't see that. But the fact that now in Yemen, the US finding out that by sending a second aircraft, that just highlights that your inability to defeat or even lift the blockade on the Red Sea, because the blockade still maintained as of today. So that's to me how I see it. So and that's why I find it very interesting that no media here in the US are really mentioning this, that are we looking at a second Vietnam in Yemen? And I think it's by design. It's by design that they are not addressing this. So that's why I wanted to do this for you guys, because this channel is about being informed. It's all about information here, because when you arm, here is the thing. My advice to you guys, When you arm yourself with knowledge, you are not going to get intimidated by statements or by somebody that's saying, oh, is this or that. Why? Because you have the knowledge. You verified that knowledge. You are certain of it. And this is what most Americans do not know because they are ill-informed. Ill-informed. You know, watching that pathetic idiot box, listening, even a president that is not qualified. You know, I mean, I'll tell Mr. Trump to his face. You know, I don't get intimidated by loud voices because I am concerned as to where things are headed. And this time around, I ain't Joe. A World War III will be the end. Why drag us into this? Because if we look at, because we end up doing the bidding of some others, you know, I'll fight for my country when it's right. But nobody came here to invade my country. So why would I go far in far lands fighting people for? Yeah, I mean, it's just common sense. Yeah. And even if we are to argue, hypothetically, that sending the second aircraft, the Carl Vinson, for some other purpose, whatever that might be, the fact that the USS Harry Truman has been targeted by the Houthis or Ansarullah, that tells me the story right there. Is the concern now is whether the Houthis will be able to sink one of the aircraft because it's a sitting duck, basically. We don't know what the Houthis have. We don't know where those weapons are, those missiles, that is. As I said, I spent time in Yemen. It's a rugged terrain. I used to go into the mountains back in the day for different purpose, for different reasons altogether. It's a rugged terrain. So, and this is what I see. I think we are going into this direction, and it's almost too late to, I feel it's too late. It's too late now because you only have one option. One option is to force Israel to lift the blockade on food and water for Gaza and go back to the ceasefire, or you're going to have to sit down in a negotiating table through a third party with the Houthis. In either cases, you have lost. Yeah. And of course, the pathetic Arab leaders and Muslim leaders, you can't, you don't include them in a picture, guys. But here is what might happen, the way I see it moving forward. At some point, the Arab and Muslim population will be fed up if they can take stand. And if they do, you're going to see a cascade of revolutions taking place, because it's about time. Literally, it's about time. The Arab Spring didn't achieve much except in Egypt and Tunisia, of course. Even the Tunisian at that time was Zine al-Abidin, who fled to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia gave him sort of refuge over there. But in Egypt, it was because in Egypt, the US intelligence community was caught off guard when the demonstration started in Tahrir Square and ended. Hosni Mubarak. Hosni Mubarak was working for us. Don't miss this. Don't miss this, guys. And that's what I'm saying. Now it's gonna be different. The US is finding out. Donald Trump didn't think. But of course, what do you expect? Trump doesn't think in those terms because he was never equipped, doesn't possess the depth of understanding the geopolitical ramifications of an action like what we are doing right now. And that is where the problem is, because you have to understand the big picture. This is about the military industrial complex. This is about who controls the policies in Washington. All that Congress, the senators and members of Congress, whatever, they're all controlled by one entity. You all know what it is. So let me say thank you to all of you who gave me, to those who gave me the super sticker. I saw it earlier. I just didn't want to forget if I deviate from that. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Darmadi Layarda for becoming a channel member. Appreciate your support. So Kevin Baptist, thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate you for that. Your question: what are your thoughts on the outcome of a Vietnam situation in Yemen, Dr. O? In other words, if it will be another Vietnam in Yemen, well, we're going to be defeated. We're going to be defeated because the way I see it is that Iran is going to support. I wouldn't even be surprised that the Russians might end up supporting behind the scenes. There will be other countries supporting behind the scenes, and that's why I'm thinking it's not going to be limited to just the two players or the two groups. I mean, or the two fighters, the U.S. and Ansarullah Houthis. No. It will expand. It's the same thing what did happen in Vietnam at the beginning. That what forced China to get into 1967 because of what Cambodia did by removing the government. So whoever thought that China doesn't go into a war, China doesn't get involved in conflicts and so forth. I mean, you look at it today. Does China have any military bases around the world? There's one that I am familiar with, is the one in Djibouti, and that's for just fueling or refueling, that is, because China's ships go through the Indian Ocean, access to the Indian Ocean. But do they have like what we have? No. Look at the US with the 50 bases in West Asia or Middle East. Look at now what the Secretary of Defense is heading out to Philippines, then Japan, then Guam, then Hawaii. So, and that's what I'm saying. The outcome is going to be different, the same way that happened in Vietnam as far as the defeat of the. I can't sugarcoat this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's my country. I get concerned, but again, when my country does wrong, I'm not going to shy away from it, because to me that's what the duty of a citizen. That is what the right thing to do, because our Constitution allows for the criticism and hold the government accountable, but our corruption went beyond control now. It's almost like we're gonna need to, it's like a building. When you start to see so many cracks, what do? You tear down the entire building and rebuild. That's the way I see it. Once again, thank you, Kevin. Truly appreciate you. Stephen Hayes, thank you so much for your super sticker. You wrote F-35 disabling key was one long-term result of malveillance, Falkland Exhort experience. I am not aware of that, the link between the two. But again, that's a good point, and thank you for bringing this up, because I am gonna, when I log off here, I'm gonna go look into this one here, because I'm not very, very familiar with this. So I don't want to say something I am not certain of. So, but thank you so much for sharing this, Stephen. Truly appreciate you. Oh, you got another super sticker once again. Can F-35 and wait for capable drones instead of cost pilots say on ground and increased survival stats? The possibility is there, but also you have to think in terms of the advancements of certain types of drones. As a matter of fact, if you know what the Chinese have developed, some advanced types of drones, and to me it will make sense if they advance in that will be for some specific targeting of specific fighter jets. That's the way I see it. So once again, thank you so much for your super sticker. Army with Harmony, good to see you as always. Can make experiment in Yemen with tactical nukes. The possibility is there, but I don't see that. Even though there's some arguments, some have made that some nuclear facilities in Iran have been targeted. I reached out to some people that I trust and couldn't confirm that. So, and I don't know, even though it was mentioned, I believe, in some interview by Witikoff. Witikoff is the U.S. envoy, or Donald Trump envoy to the Middle East and Gaza and all that stuff. Witikoff is not well versed in understanding the history of the Middle East. So he is a savvy guy when it comes down to real estate, but not this stuff here. So once again, thank you all for your super sticker. Truly, truly appreciate you for that. And to those who wants to support the channel, here is a link if you want to support the channel here. And I also have another link for the Asia trip. And speaking of Asia trip, just quickly, as I promised you yesterday, I followed through with what I said. I told you I will do an update, and here is the update of the yeah, let me show you this one where we are. Here is where we are. So we crossed the first 1,000 for the Asia trip. So I will greatly appreciate your support for the Asia trip. All right, guys, remember to join me on Thursday. I don't know if I'm going to do live stream for you tomorrow or not. We shall see. And remember to join me on the big channel on Geopolitics and Money on Thursday. Oh, no, I'm sorry, on Friday. Because on Thursday, I'm having Larry here. And on Friday, both on the other channel, Geopolitics and Money, we do our live stream. And at 7 p.m., my conversation with Kalza. And on Saturday, we do the community conversation. I'll have Dr. Stewart join us to answer some of your questions. So prepare some of your health questions, and we'll have our monthly conversation. No geopolitics, so on Saturday. So I look forward to seeing you guys. As always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time. Bye-bye.